I don't think I can use that. I'm not a feathery type person.
Granddaughters will exhaust you far more quickly than grandsons, that's for sure.
You want some earrings? Fingernail polish?
I think I'll pass on both of them.
You know, I don't do makeup. I don't care who's waving lipstick and Maybelline around. I ain't going there at all.
See, real men don't fool with stuff like that. You need some kind of girly man. If we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it right. I want nail polish on my nails.
Get the nail polish out.
I've had a lot of people tell me that I have a feminine side. Right? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Do this with your hands.
Oh, you do this?
Well, that's one of them deals. You toss a coin and, hey, hope it hits on the right side.
We need some lipstick for him. Does anybody have
Lipstick? I know I've got a tiara on my head, earrings on my ears, lip gloss.
I don't have any feathers.
I have two.
I think the little feather thing that I had around my neck and going over my shoulder, hey, that was the finest touch. The rest of it was just window dressing.
And you could put on a dress.
Oh, no, wait a minute. We're going too far now.
Oh, no, yeah, you're going to put on a dress, all right.
No, hey, don't confuse me with a man that likes to dress up.
I'm gonna draw the line on, hey, no dress.
Good night of living, Si. I didn't know you had it in you.
You want another hand? Whew. How I feel is being a stick in the mud.
About a week ago, Congressman, you said that the Congressional Progressive Caucus had 70 or so communists. Do you have any regrets about those?
No, I don't regret it whatsoever. And I think that if you would take the time to study the political spectrum of ideologies, you would understand that at the turn of the century, American communists renamed themselves as progressives. If you study the Woodrow Wilson administration, people referred to the Woodrow Wilson administration as a progressive administration. Now, what I would hope that people would do in the media is maybe you should do a little research and start looking at what political ideologies are, what they stand for. There's a very thin line. It's about nationalizing production. It's about creating, expanding a welfare state. It's about this idea of social and economic justice, and you hear that being played out, you know, now with fairness, fair share, economic equality, shared sacrifice, ad nauseum, ad infinitum. And it's also about creation of a secular state. And this whole argument that the liberal left is trying to take you down, talking about women's contraception, is really about a federal government that is reclassifying religious organizations for them to be able to manipulate them however they wish. So that's what I wish people would focus on. Now, let me also bring something up. Since I've been up here, first time ever in politics, past 15 months, we've had members of the Democrat Party stand up and talk about how Republicans want to kill women. We've been called racist. We've been called sexist. We've been called homophobes, Islamophobes. We hear people constantly talking about the Tea Party right-wing extremists of the Republican Party. But I don't see anyone, getting upset and challenging the other side about this. And I welcome anyone to have a discussion and a debate about political ideology. Because when you look at what is happening in this country right now, you tell me that this government is not nationalizing production. Automobile industry, financial sector, healthcare, cap and trade did not go through the legislative process. Look what they're doing through the EPA as far as the energy sector. Look at what's happening with the National Labor Relations Board. Who would have ever thought that we live in the United States of America where the federal government would be telling a private sector organization where they could relocate? Now, you look at some of the bills that have come out of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. These are individuals that voted against having a balanced budget amendment, but yet they wanted to have a constitutional amendment so that they could redistribute wealth. I don't know if that's in keeping in your version of a constitutional republic, but when I went through my studies, it surely was not. So I stand by what I'm saying, and it's very interesting that people on the left are not debating the point that I made. They just don't like the fact that it was made.
Mr. West, I can follow up on that. Since you say it's just not an issue of nomenclature, do you really believe in your heart of hearts that they adhere to the political philosophies of
Chad, I just went down the line and gave you examples of legislation. I just went down the line and talked to you about the means. But look, okay, you want to talk about creating and expanding the welfare state? Look at Inauguration Day with how many people were on food stamps. Look at Inauguration Day, how many people were in poverty, and look at where we are today. You want me to tell you exactly where we are? Okay, as of 27 March, we had 46 million people on food stamps. On Inauguration Day, we had 32 million. That's a 45% increase. Americans in poverty on Inauguration Day, 39.8. Today, as of 27 March, 46.2. That's a 6.4 million increase. That's what I'm talking about, creating and expanding a welfare state. So, folks, do your research. Understand these ideologies. And this is a choice between two very clear futures for the United States of America. And I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to be afraid about the fact that I call a spade a spade. That's my responsibility to the American people.
On this program, because history serves as a damning series of rock-solid evidence that progressive policies do not work. The only way to convince people to keep trying them is to keep changing the names, places, dates, erase whole sections of history. You've got to change history. Progressives are an enemy to the Constitution. They want to progress past the Constitution. Woodrow Wilson and FDR are propped up as great American presidents. If you read anything about Woodrow Wilson, you will not believe that this guy isn't known as one of the worst presidents of all time. Racist, awful, awful man. I don't even have to start with his policies. Oh, but I could. We're told about all the wonderful things FDR did. You know, he got us out of the New Deal, out of the Great Depression. No, wait a minute. Can we ask this question? Why is the Depression called the Depression every other country except for America? In America, it's called the Great Depression because of the policies of FDR. Now, have you ever heard of Calvin Coolidge? If so, what do you know about him? You read anything in your history books and they'll say, oh, well, he ran a laissez-faire style government. Oh, let's just pause for a moment and savor the thought of laissez-faire government. I don't even know what that means. Calvin Coolidge, the president progressives need you to forget about. He was actually Ronald Reagan's favorite president, or one of them. He drastically reduced the size of government and thwarted a depression. A depression in 1920? Did you even know that? Bigger, deeper than 1929. What did he do to get out of that depression, out of that decline? Country was in horrible shape when he came into office, and then when he left, it was the Roaring 20s.
The opposite of a modern president, when he saw trouble, he refrained and stood back and said, therefore, things may get better if someone stays out of the way. What are examples? A big one was the flood of the Mississippi in 1927, which was their Katrina. Did Coolidge race down there? No, he did not. He sent his Commerce Secretary, Hoover, but he didn't jump in. He said, well, maybe the federal government's role isn't to jump in. Maybe it's the job of the states to manage a regional crisis. There was federal funding that he signed for this crisis, this terrible flood, but he made the lawmakers reduce the funding to 1/3 of its size. He said, don't magnify this emergency and give a new role to the federal government. Make it smaller and handle it.
Now, Coolidge also opposes federal aid to highways and such, and this kind of taking money from one state, Texas, and giving it to New York or whatever. You know, this is what he said. To tempt the states by federal subsidies is to sacrifice their vested rights. It is not a wholesome practice, no matter how worthy the object to be obtained. It's just something which rewards the profligate, encourages waste. When you get money for free, you don't work it. like as if you worked it to earn it.
Nothing of value. You don't appreciate the value of something.
And he understood that because of his background in Vermont. He comes from a very tiny little place, Plymouth Notch in Vermont, and he goes around with his father, who's a tax collector. And he says, when I went around with my father, I realized that people had to work to earn money to pay those taxes. A very simple lesson, but which a lot of people in Washington don't know today.
Woodrow Wilson has taken this country, and while he's in office, he has given us federal income tax. He has given us prohibition. Woodrow Wilson gave us the Fed. He totally transformed things. He's introducing now social justice. He's tried to introduce the League of Nations, which is basically the United Nations, and Americans like that League of Nations as much as we now like the League of Nations. It was through trickery and progressive tactics that got the United Nations through. They learn. That's what progressives, one thing they do is they learn which devices work and which don't. So he was wildly unpopular. His second term, he runs against the war, and he says, I'll keep you out of war. In January, he is sworn in, and I think it's the next month.
March. He's sworn in March back then, yes.
Okay.
And in April, we're at war.
That we're missing, which is there was a police strike in Boston at this time, an example of new union power and progressive power. And the policemen were underpaid, so it was a compelling strike. But Coolidge, the governor overseeing the police commissioners, said, these people are striking and we're having trouble in Boston. Chaos, people being hurt, maybe killed. And he said there is no right to strike against the public safety by anyone, anywhere, anytime. This was Governor Coolidge, and the country heard and said, someone has drawn the line. The unions can only go so far and not farther. There's no right to strike against the public safety, and that woke the country up. Liberal sense. That is, he stood up for the individual.
Libertarian.
Liberal in the European sense.
Right.
Which is, he stood up for women when women got the vote just around then, and he was a big fan of women. He appointed women, but not as a group, as individuals. Not just as Ward Connerly would say, blacks are Americans, not a political group. As individuals, he was a big help to blacks in the same way. Let them be citizens like the rest.
We're talking about one of my favorite U.S. presidents, Calvin Coolidge. This is a seat cushion. Oh, there's some presidents' faces that belong, well, never mind.
Taxes are cut under Harding, like from 70 to 56%, and then Coolidge ratchets it up even more. You know, unemployment is 3.3% during Coolidge's 6 years. The gross national product increases by 7%. Per capita income grows by 30%. Real earnings
before we get
up by 22%.
Mellon and Coolidge actually believed in trickle-down. If the rich people paid less tax, they would invest more and there would be more jobs.
50% of the country doesn't pay income tax. They actually get money.
Coolidge does not create that prosperity. 3 times as many cars.
3 times as many cars.
And
electricity in half the country.
They not only reduce taxes, but he reduces the spending by at least half, does he not?
Roughly.
Roughly, about half.
And he reduces the national debt.
So it was a golden time when people earned more and their money was worth more, and in addition to the cars, their houses were electrified. So that meant for women especially, housework changed. Women could turn to other things. They didn't have to rub washboards all day.
That was an average person was able to have real leisure time.
They could, and radio comes in. The movies are more and more popular. Education spending increases in the 1920s 4 times. 1930, we don't get out because of Herbert Hoover.